You have your page that's called Tools for Lumdus. I want you to write down a very important tool. I will try to explain it through this Gemara in Kiddushin on Daf Chav Tes. There's something called a Ptur, Pei Tes Vav Reish, which is loosely translated into English as an exemption. In contrast, there's something called a Hafkaah. And I'll spell that for you. Hey, Pei, Kuf, Ayin, Hey. So again, you'll get more familiar with this as we go along. But as a very important introduction to Lumdus, we always have to differentiate between a Ptur and a Hafkaah. I'll give one example before we get to our Gemara for today. We know that a woman has certain mitzvos that she's obligated in and certain mitzvos that she's exempt from. Those mitzvahs are generally called mitzvahs aseh shazman grom, time-bound mitzvahs. An eved, now keep in mind, we're talking about an eved Knani, has the same status for mitzvahs as an isha does. In fact, the Gemara derives that from la, but that's not important for us now. What's important for us is to know that an eved is likewise exempt from time-bound mitzvahs. However, my Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik used to always point out that there's a fundamental difference between an isha, a woman vis-a-vis man groma, those mitzvahs, and an eved vis-a-vis those mitzvahs. In the case of an isha, she can voluntarily choose to fulfill those mitzvahs. So, for example, she doesn't have to hear the shofar. She doesn't have to take a lulav. She doesn't have to sit in sukkah. But if she so desires, she can do so. And she will get duly rewarded. That's called a ptur, an exemption. It's almost as if I can give al derech mashal, let's say you don't have to take a certain class because you're exempted from the class. But if you're very motivated and you want to learn that which that class is offering, so voluntarily you go to the class, you attend, you even might take the exams or write a paper for that's called an exemption. Exemption means, in halachic terms, that you could be makayim the mitzvah, but on a voluntary basis. Your schar will not be as great as that which applies to a bar chiyuv for somebody who's obligated, but that's not for us now. Now we have something called an eved. An eved is not an exemption from mitzvahs aseh mind grama time-bound mitzvahs, but rather hafkaah. Hafkaah means he's completely knocked out of the box. He has no relationship whatsoever to those mitzvahs. And if he voluntarily fulfills those mitzvahs, he gets no reward whatsoever. And the nafkamina is going to be in terms of a bracha. According to Rabbeinu Tam, and that's how Ashkenazic Jews paskin, like this Rabbeinu Tam, a woman will make a bracha on a mitzvah saseh man groma, meaning if she volunteers for the mitzvah, she will go ahead and recite a bracha, and she'll say, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvah sav. Now let's emphasize the word kidshanu. Sometimes we make a bracha, we don't pay attention to the words of the bracha. The word kidshanu means that any mitzvah in the Torah is considered as such because of the kedusha, the sanctity of a Jew. So, for example, the sanctity of a non-Jew only reaches the level of 7. And then we have a ger tzedek who gets more mitzvahs. And then we have an eved who gets more mitzvahs. And as we go up the ladder and we're obligated in more and more mitzvahs, we get a greater kedusha. And the greatest kedusha is that of 613 mitzvahs. A woman could likewise recite the bracha asher kidshanu b'mitzvah, so because she has the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah optionally on a voluntary basis. But having done so, she does have a fulfillment of the mitzvah. And therefore, if a woman hears the shofar, she can recite a bracha and say Asher Kidshanu. She has the kedusha for that mitzvah. Just the Torah said you're exempt for whatever reason. We don't know why. Not so in the case of an eved. An eved is called a hafkaah. Hafkaah means he doesn't have the kedushas Yisrael because he's still an eved. He hasn't undergone the full gerus, what I say gerus, conversion, and so his kedushas Yisrael is very limited. And if he goes beyond his kedushas Yisrael to try to fulfill those mitzvahs that are outside of his orbit, he does not get any reward for that. They're just meaningless acts. In that sense, he's very much similar to a guy. If a guy voluntarily wants to do a mitzvah, he wants to put on tzitzis, he wants to observe the Shabbos, he wants to wear tefillin, he gets no schar for that. He is obligated in the kedusha of 7 mitzvahs. He doesn't have the kedusha beyond the 7 mitzvahs. In a similar way, the eved is obligated in X number of mitzvahs, whatever the number might be, but beyond that, the mitzvahs that he is not shaykh to, he's not shaykh to. What's that called in our language of Lumdus? When I say that he's not shaykh to those mitzvahs at all?
Hafkaah.
Hafkaah. Everybody. We're going to, I'm into the choir business because I like the choir idea because it emphasizes certain phrases or words that I want you to memorize. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. I'm going to say the word hafkaah. 1, 2, 3.
Hafkaah.
Hafkaah. Okay. So again, in the case of an eved, we're talking about a hafkaah. And the nafkamina is that if an eved would optionally want to do a mitzvah that's time bound, he would get no schar for that whatsoever. He would not make a bracha. He cannot say Asher Kidshanu mitzvah. A woman has the kedusha of all 613 mitzvahs, just that in certain cases, certain mitzvahs, because of the time element and urgency, she was exempt from the mitzvah. But as I gave you before in the mashal, if somebody is exempt from a certain class, but he decides, because he's very motivated, he wants to take that class, then he'll get duly rewarded. He might even add another couple of credits on his college diploma. He might get honors for it. He's on a voluntary basis. He comes to the class. Now, having said all that, I would like to ask the following question. And I don't think my Rebbe addressed this question, at least not head on, maybe indirectly. A katan, what's the status of a katan? In terms of mitzvahs, we know that a katan is exempt from mitzvahs. Is it a ptur or is it a hafkaah? If a katan would go ahead and voluntarily fulfill mitzvahs, would he get credit for it? Would he be rewarded for it? Just like an isha, like a woman who goes ahead and implements mitzvahs that are not obligatory, but on a voluntary basis. The question again is whether a katan is a ptur, meaning he's included in the mitzvahs, but the Torah exempted him because he's very young. Or do we say no, that the status of a katan is, it's not an exemption. A katan has never actually stepped into the arena as far as mitzvahs is concerned. He remains outside the purview of mitzvahs. He's out in the cold, and he has no mitzvah whatsoever. If he was allowed to make a bracha on a mitzvah, it's only because of what's called chinuch. Chinuch means a rabbinic obligation of education, that we want to get the child trained to do mitzvahs. But that's only a training. That has nothing to do with the real McCoy mitzvah. Yeah, you want to just speak out, so I can hear you.
I'd say that the mitzvah of chinuch, like the idea of chinuch, applies to the mitzvahs, and it would be as ptur, because if it was a hafkaah, there would be how to explain this?
Well, again, let's just, I don't want to get distracted here with chinuch, because chinuch is a rabbinic institution. I'm talking about the doraisa, the Torah law. I want to know when the Torah said that only an ish the word ish appears in many cases in the Torah, and the Gemara says that ish lafuke katan, when the Torah says that the obligation of mitzvahs is incumbent upon an ish and not on a katan, what is being said over here? Are we saying that the katan just, he's a minor, he cannot do mitzvahs, he doesn't have mitzvahs? He's outside of the whole purview of mitzvahs. As I said before, he's out in the cold. Well, no. A katan, if he's mature, if he's, he may be even precocious. They say about the Vilna Gaon at the age of 6, he knew more than we'll ever know. But, it doesn't matter whether you're precocious or not. It could be that the Torah is saying, no. The katan is not included in the mitzvahs. Or we're saying, no. A katan is included in the mitzvahs, but he's pטור. The Torah wanted to go easy on a katan. The Torah exempted him from mitzvahs, but he is really included in the mitzvahs. Now, keep in mind that the Gemara often uses a phrase, which I'd like you to write down because I think it's laden with meaning. Alav bar chiyuva. You want to write that down? Lav, which means not. Bar, we'll talk about the word bar in a second. Chiyuva. Chiyuva means obligation. A bar chiyuva, otherwise known as a bar mitzvah, is someone who is capable of the mitzvah. He's included in the mitzvah. He's a bar mitzvah. Like, for example, if you wanted to speak about someone who's capable of winning a race, you might say in Aramaic, you would say he's a bar hachi. He's in the picture. He may win the race, he may not win the race, but he might win the race. That's called a bar, in this case, chiyuva. And you'll see the word bar very often in Shas, because the question of bar is a question of whether someone is included or excluded. That's called a bar. For example, you may not know this, and I hope you won't know it in the near future at all, but life is the way it goes. There's someone called an onain. Aleph, Vav, Nun, Nun. Anybody know what an onain is?
Mourner?
Don't all answer at once because I can't hear so many voices.
Moshe said it was a mourner.
Correct. You're 90% of the way there, but I have to add another 10%. A mourner, which is called an avel, not an onain, an avel.
Oh, is it an orphan? Is
obligated in all the mitzvahs. In fact, he takes the lead in all the mitzvahs. He'll be the shliach tzibur. That's an avel. That's mourning. But there's something before the period of mourning, which is before the burial of the dead of one of your relatives, and that's called an onain. He's pטור min mitzvahs. He is exempt from all mitzvahs. And now the question arises whether he's a bar chiyuva, but there's an exemption because we have to be, how shall I say, very sensitive, and we have to identify with his suffering, and therefore we exempt him from mitzvahs, but he's really a bar chiyuva, or no. Shall we say that an onain is out of the box? He's not a bar chiyuva. And there the poskim talk about whether or not the onain will have to recite a tfilas tashlumin after the burial. Do you follow? Let's say he missed mincha because he was an onain. An onain doesn't daven mincha. But now it's still light out. It's before shkia, and they bury the dead. He's no longer an onain. And let's say now it's after shkia. Let me give you that example. So the question is, well, he missed the tefillah, and therefore he has to make it up by adding another tefillah. If you say that an onain is a bar chiyuva, then, like any bar chiyuva, he has to make up the tefillah that he missed. But if you're saying he's not a bar chiyuva, he was never included in the chiyuv, he didn't have to daven mincha because he was an onain, then there's no tefillas tashlumim. He doesn't have to make up something that he wasn't even obligated in to begin with. So again, over and over again, we're going to see this kind of debate about whether a person is a bar chiyuv with a pטור, that's called a pטור, or he's not a bar chiyuv at all, and he's completely, shall we say, out of the box. Okay. Now we're going to talk about a katan. We asked the question, what's the status of a katan? Is he a bar chiyuva with a ptur, or he's a lav bar chiyuva, he's mufka, he's in the hafkaah case, and he doesn't have the mitzvahs? That was our question. Now this becomes very relevant with regard to the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And this is going to come up in the Achronim, in the commentaries on the Gemara here on Chavtes Amud Beis. So without further ado, let's open up to Chavtes Amud Beis in Masechta Kiddushin. And we're going to look at the following Gemara. The Gemara starts with Ihi Minolan. Now, there are different printings of the Gemara, so I don't know if what I'm going to tell you is true for the Gemara you have in front of you, but in my Gemara, there are wide lines, and if you go up before the wide lines, you go up 2 lines, it says V'ihi, excuse me, which is 2 lines before the end of the narrow lines. So let me ask you, in your Gemara, do you see the words V'ihi Minolan? Raise your hand if you see such words. V'ihi Minolan on Chavtes Amud Beis.
Yeah, 2 lines up in the thick lines.
In the thick lines.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
I don't see anyone's hand going up here, so it's...
Very good.
Oh, you found it? Ihi Minolan?
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. Now let's translate. What does the word V'ihi mean? Ihi is the Aramaic for the word he meaning she. Minolan means from whence do we derive it? And what are we trying to derive? De lo mechayva lemelif nafsha. A woman is exempt from Talmud Torah. And translating the Gemara literally, she doesn't have an obligation to teach herself Torah. Now, the Mishnah on Chavtes Amud Aleph, mitzvahs haben ala av, which impose an obligation on the father vis-a-vis his son, anoshim chayovim v'noshim pturos. Do you remember that? You can take a look back on Chavtes Amud Aleph very quickly. And the Mishnah says, Kol mitzvahs haben ala av, anoshim chayovim v'noshim pturos. So let's say a child is born. Does the mother have to make sure that there's a moel to circumcise her son? Does the mother, after the child is the b'char, after his 30 days, does she have to make sure to pay the 30 slaim to the Kohen? Or does the mother have to teach her son Torah? And what's the answer, Abosai?
Exempt.
She's exempt. Why? Because the Mishnah says, Kol mitzvahs haben ala av, anoshim chayovim, the fathers are obligated, v'noshim pturos, and the mothers are exempt. So the bottom line is that a mother does not have to teach her son Torah. And the Gemara wants to know minola. How do we know such a thing? After all, a woman is exempt from what kind of mitzvahs? Time-bound mitzvahs, right? Zaman Groma. But the mitzvah of Torah study is not in any way bound by time. It's a 24/7 mitzvah, 7 days a week, 365 days in a year, and I'll emphasize 365 lest someone come and say, no, it's only 364. Why would anybody want to drop one day out of the year?
Leap year?
Which?
Leap year?
No, I'm talking about Tisha B'Av. We don't study Torah on Tisha B'Av. Did you know that?
Ah.
But the truth is, that's a common misnomer. We do have a mitzvah of Talmud Torah to study Torah on Tisha B'Av. Just we have to be careful about which part of the Torah we study. So, if I were to ask you to classify Talmud Torah under one of two categories, one, mitzvah seisha zman groma, time bound. Two, mitzvah seisha eina zman groma, that's number two, that's B. Where would you classify Talmud Torah?
B.
B, it's not zman groma. Therefore, women should be obligated. So we have to figure out why a woman is exempt from Talmud Torah. And that's what this Gemara is all about, to try to figure out why she doesn't have to teach Torah, why she doesn't have to study Torah, why doesn't the father have to teach her Torah, and so forth and so on. How do we know all these dinim? And the Gemara is going to go through a whole rigmarole of very, very carefully crafted drushos, xerishavos, in order to substantiate that a mother does not have to teach her son Torah, that a mother does not have to study Torah. So the first round, what I would maybe suggest, it's a recommendation, it's up to you. I would write down the numbers 1, skip a few lines, 2, skip a few lines, 3, and let's write down under 1, a mother teaching Torah, under 2, a mother studying Torah, and under 3, the father teaching his daughter Torah. In other words, we're asking 3 questions. Number 1, how do we know that a mother doesn't have to teach her son Torah? Number 2, how do we know that a mother doesn't have to study Torah? And number 3, how do we know that a father doesn't have to study Torah with his daughter and teach his daughter Torah?
What's number 3?
Father teaching Torah.
That we know that
Okay?
doesn't have to teach Torah?
Because again, there are 3 dimensions to Talmud Torah. 1 is teaching Torah, the other is studying Torah, and the third is being taught Torah. That's also part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And we're saying that a woman is excluded from all 3 categories. But how do we know this? And the Gemara is going to tell me, A, how do we know the first category, that she doesn't have to teach Torah? Number 2, B, how do we know she doesn't have to study Torah? Number C, how do we know and derive that she doesn't have to be taught Torah? All right, then? So we're going to go through 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, how do we know that she doesn't have to teach Torah? And the Gemara says that we know this because there are 2 passages, 2 verses in the Torah that have an identical word. Again, it's identical only in the way you see it written, not in the way you pronounce it. And one pasuk says "V'limadatem osam," and the other pasuk says "Ulamadatem osam." Now, the first pasuk "V'limadatem" has to do with teaching Torah, and the second pasuk of "V'lamadatem," again in the Torah itself, they're spelled identically, just the way we pronounce it. That's called Kriyan Ksiv, if you're familiar. But when it comes to ulamadatem, we're deriving one's obligation to study Torah. So again, v'limadatem is to teach Torah, and v'lamadatem is to study Torah. And the Gemara says that because the Torah uses the same word in both contexts, we can compare them and we can derive conclusions about that. What is that called when you see the same word twice?
Xerishava.
Excellent, Xerishava. So we have a Xerishava. And the Xerishava now tells us the following, if you could write this down. Only someone who is obligated to study Torah has to teach Torah. That's why a woman doesn't have to teach Torah. Then we get to number 2. How do we know that she doesn't have to study Torah? And the Gemara says you only have an obligation to study Torah if others have to teach you Torah. So that's what you're going to write down for number 2. Should I go over that one more time? So again, number 1 is you don't have to teach Torah because you don't have to study Torah. Meaning if you do have to study Torah, then you have to teach Torah. But if you don't have to study Torah, you don't have to teach Torah. Number 2, only someone who others have to teach is obligated to study. And then we get to number 3, and the father has to teach his son's Torah, but not his daughter's Torah. So that's derived from a pasuk that says, "V'limadetem osam es b'nechem," and as we said before, "b'nechem v'lo b'nosechem." So basically, it's kind of like, I call it a domino theory. You know what I mean by a domino theory? That it's like a chain of a cause and effect chain. If somebody has to teach you Torah, then you have to study Torah and you have to teach Torah. If no one has to teach you, then you don't have to study and you don't have to teach others. Do we have that? I'm looking at like blank faces. Are you following me?
What's the third one? Why a father doesn't have to teach a daughter?
Again, I don't remember where. We'll go through all 3 again. Is that okay? Are you here? Number 1. You're not obligated to study Torah unless somebody has to teach you Torah. If no one has to teach you Torah, then you're not obligated to study Torah. And if you're obligated to study Torah, then you have to teach Torah. If you're not obligated to study Torah, you don't have to teach Torah. So let's it goes in both directions. We could start with number 1. Number 1 was, does a woman have to teach Torah? And the answer is, well, no, she doesn't have to study Torah. Yeah, but how do you know she doesn't have to study Torah? And the answer is because no one has to teach her Torah. So really, in a sense, conceptually, it really starts with, do you have to be taught Torah? Meaning, do others have to teach you Torah? And it falls into place like a domino theory. If somebody has to teach you Torah, you have to study Torah, then you have to teach Torah. If no one has to teach you Torah, then you don't have to study Torah. And if you don't have to study Torah, you don't have to teach Torah. Got it? Oh. Let's see. Maybe these guys will still come back on, or maybe we're going to have to. We have to start all over again.